Hi, I'm Nikki, the Obsessive Bookseller. Welcome to my channel, and welcome to my first yearly wrap-up for Project Read, Burn, Hoard. Originally inspired by Books with Emily Fox's 1 Week, 1 Shelf challenge, this is something I've been doing for the last 9 months to help myself work my way through my unread section of my library. I choose 1 shelf per month and take that entire month to evaluate everything on it very carefully. And I've said this before, but this is my favorite ongoing series I have on my channel. I'm having so much fun exploring in detail everything on my shelves, and even putting everything together for this wrap-up video. I am just so thrilled at how much progress I've been able to make, and seeing the accumulation of all of these efforts is really satisfying. The initial goal of this challenge was to reduce my inventory down enough to be able to fit a comfy chair in this room. I have had the most uncomfortable chair in here since I put this room together, and it's time for a change. But spoiler alert for the end of the video, I have since acquired my beautiful new chair. The goal was a success, and yeah, I can't wait to show you what I got. But up to that point, I want to go through all of the books I read this year, show you what worked for me, what didn't, and then even more satisfyingly, I'm going to go through my bin of burn candidates and decide if I actually want to let everything go that I put in there. I think I will. I don't find myself thinking about any of the titles I put in there going, I don't know if I want to let that one go or not. So we shall see. It could be one of those instances where you pack something away in your garage for several years and then just happen to find it and be like, ooh, I forgot I had this. Okay, let's talk about the books I read. I'm going to go in order from least successful to most successful. Coming in at number 1 as the worst book I read for this project, Signet by Patricia McKillop. This was a DNF at about 40%, and nothing about this book worked for me. It was a really odd, stupid hodgepodge of nonsensical things. The plot didn't make any sense. There was a prophecy that basically gave away what was going to happen eventually anyway, so had I kept reading, there wasn't going to be anything surprising to me. It was just an odd book. And I didn't like the writing style. There's a fine line between creative license and going so far that you don't actually make any sense. There were sentences in here, I use the term loosely, that didn't even have both a subject and a verb. I mean, we're talking absolutely gorgeous cover. I was hoping that Signet was referring to the dragons on the cover, you know, like maybe because they have elongated necks, but no. The first story that I read in here was about an actual swan. There was a theological component to this story that I also didn't care for. Nothing about this book worked. So this is definitely going in my burn pile, and it's staying in there. What a shame. Next in line, Chris Longknife Mutineer by Mike Shepard. The idea for this story was good. The components were good. Lost me on execution. I did not like anything about how this one was written. The character was very forced and overdone, like melodramatic, and granted I didn't make it very far, but what I got within the first, say, like 100 pages of reading was not the epic sci-fi that I signed up for. This one was also a DNF, and what ultimately made me put it down was the character. I didn't like her at all. She was petulant, she was a spoiled brat. I do realize that that's a good basis for a growth arc, but like I said, the execution wasn't very good. And so even though the ideas and all of the potential were there, I just didn't like how it was written. Let that one go. 12 Kings of Sharakai. I had books 2 and 3 on my shelves and really wanted to give this one a try. World building always goes a really long way with me in books, and I loved the idea of these massive airships with all of these sails. I thought it was so cool. And I did not enjoy this story. I ended up DNFing it at about 50 or 60%. The world building was great, but the characters were not. They were so thin and unbelievable, and the whole plot of the story was so boring and dragged out, and I don't know. I'd have to go back and watch my rant because I'd almost forgotten to include this one on this video because I didn't like it so much. I also found the prose unnecessarily wordy. It made every sentence twice as long, and it really didn't need to be, and it was at the sacrifice of clarity. And I know it's a creative style or whatever, but the way it was done did not work for me at all. And I found myself really not caring about where the plot went. Like, it would go through a single page, maybe even half a page of action, and then we would spend the next 50 or 60 pages kind of rehashing what happened in that little bit of action. Then, oh, the implications! So needless to say, I am burning the next 2 books in that series, and what a shame. Next up, Mistress of Dragons by Margaret Wise. This one had a lot of problems, but overall it was an interesting read. The ideas behind it were really good. It needed more dragons in it. I know that sounds weird, but the prologue was so good. It was talking about this dragon council that got together, and for some reason they decided to send a human out to do their work for them, which it wasn't from a stance of like, well, we're too good for that. It was just, it didn't make any sense. The only reason to do that was to get a person from point A to point B to tell the story that she wanted to tell. Like, it felt so contrived to me. And there were just like a bunch of weird things in the story that kind of don't sit very well after you finish it. You're like, well, that was kind of not the best. I'm having such a hard debate with this one because it was a 2.5 out of 5 stars at best. And I have the other two on my shelf, and I'm trying to decide if I want to let them go or not. I mean, I think the hardcover versions are absolutely gorgeous, stunning books to look at, but I just can't decide if I want to bring myself to read the next book. I think the fact that it's lingering and I'm still mildly interested in it tells me I need to hang on to those two for a little bit while longer. I actually have them in a separate Unhaul pile over here, and it's the only one in that pile that's making me think twice. Even though it was only a 2.5 out of 5 stars, like realistically, am I going to get back to this anytime soon? Probably not. But I don't think I'm quite ready to let it go yet. Meh. The Summer Dragon by Todd Lockwood. This one was mildly better in the sense that this physical book is a really cool thing to have. The author is an illustrator by profession and did all of the artwork in his book, and it's just stunning. So if nothing else, reading this physical copy was an absolute experience. Like, beautiful. This is one of those books that started out with a bang. It's separated into 3 parts, and the first part was phenomenal. In fact, I'd recommend it as a short story. The second part was okay, but they started getting into these like theological debates, which there's a theme here that doesn't really work for me very often, but it wasn't even very interesting theological debate. It was rehatching incredibly simple concepts, and they're like, whoa, we've never thought of this before, and I find that incredibly hard to believe. That whole section was basically talking about that and then reiterating everything that happened in the first section, so there was no forward progression. And I gave it a good 100 pages of that before I finally got fed up and started speed reading to the end. And bits and pieces, the end did pick up quite a bit. The villains were really cool, creative. I liked the villains, but I didn't like their placement in the story. It seems so contrived, like, oh, we're gonna go out to this location. It's very dangerous. We don't really have a reason to be here, but the author needs some reason for them to get attacked. The dragons in here were absolutely fantastic. Like I said, read part 1 and just consider it a short story and put the book down from there. Like 4 or 5 stars. I really loved part 1. It did take a little while to get into it at first. You're not sure if you're getting kind of like a YA story or not, but it grows into itself. This is such a beautiful copy that I haven't decided if I want to burn it or not, because I ended up not liking the end part of it. For the moment, it is sitting on my shelf because I don't need the space, but it might work its way out of my collection at some point, but I'm clutching it for now just because it's pretty. Howl's Moving Castle by Diane Wynne Jones. This is one of my most recent reads. It was okay. It's like kind of a fairy tale quality, kind of meandering plot. None of the plot points really gave me any sense of substance. The main characters were so focused on everything else that I never felt their connection to each other. And then I watched the movie, and they took every single element out of this book and enhanced it to the max. Like, the movie was brilliant. They added a romance through line that was the anchor that the plot needed. All of these elements came together and suddenly it made sense. And I half wonder if that's what the author was doing initially. I just missed the romance component because it wasn't very heavy. Through the book, I didn't see the connection between the characters at all. I mean, he was focused on everything else. He was out dating people, courting them rather, but you know what I mean. This one's a little higher up on my ranking though, because the basic writing style and quality of story and imagination were up there. And even though the book wasn't for me, I much preferred the movie. I can see other people enjoying the book. But I will say, I don't know that you'll get that much more out of the book if you've already seen the movie, because they kind of took the best bits and made it better, so leave that as it is. Magic Kingdom for Sale, Sold by Terry Brooks. The covers for this series are wild. I've had them forever. I mean, these grew up with me. I remember laying these on the floor in our apartment when I was like 3 or 4 years old and using them as stepping stones By the way, current me would be horrified if my children did that with my books. But I am glad to have finally read this one. I actually enjoyed the first half. This guy is a lawyer. He's in our world. He's down on his luck. All these tragic things have happened to him, and he's, no, not really down on his luck. He's a very privileged man, makes a lot of money, can afford to buy a kingdom, but life circumstances have him feeling like things are meaningless. And I think that's the only thing I really took away from this story, is this kind of sense of hopelessness, but then you have a spark of hope and you kind of are willing to do weird things to chase that. And that's something that I can relate to. So I love the first part, and I was basically waiting to see if getting to Landover, if the juice was worth the squeeze. Like if the kingdom that we go to is worth all of the build-up getting there. And it was just mediocre. It was very classic fantasy types of things. Nothing to write home about. Typical tropes. One or two elements I found interesting. But like I said, the covers for the next few books are wild. I plan on continuing the series just to see where it goes. If nothing else, I'd like to try the second book. The basic writing is very adept. I liked his writing style in this one much better than the Shannara trilogy that I read ages ago. I would like to point out that if not for Read, Burn, Hoard, I would not have picked up any of these books within the next 10 years. So it forces me to try different things, and I like that. Southern Fire by Juliet McKenna. Really like this author from her Thief's Gambit series, Tales of Aneurin. I always say the name wrong, but it's something to that effect. This is the first book in a 4-book series, and I quite like this one. Really cool world building. Like I said, that goes a long way with me. I love the characters. I thought the just whole atmosphere and concept for the place was really good. In fact, I went out, this is not the copy that I started with, but I went out and bought these beautiful editions from the UK. And I have yet to make my way further in the series, but these aren't available on audio, and it took me almost an entire month to read this one, and I imagine the next ones are going to take about the same time frame. I'm very curious to see where things end up. The exotic location of this story, that alone is 3 stars. So cool, so richly done. You feel really enmeshed in these locations. I think I ended up giving this one a 4-star. I can't remember what kept it from being a 5. I think maybe slower pacing. It could have clipped along a little bit better. I don't think it needed to drag on quite that long. But then again, was it really slow pacing, or was it just because it took me forever to read? Sometimes it's hard for me to tell with physical reads these days. Liked that one. Taste of Magic by Vicky Peterson. First book in the Sign of the Zodiac series. This is not a recommendable urban fantasy book, but for some reason I really enjoyed it. As I'm reading, my critical mind is like, ooh, I'm gonna have to disclaim that if I talk about this book, or, oh, I don't think that would work for a lot of readers, and oh, I can't believe she added that. So it had tons of problems, but I enjoyed it. It was quite weird. I'm looking forward to seeing where the story goes next. There were a lot of cliche components to it. Like I said, it is definitely not the first one I would hand you if you asked me what urban fantasy to start with. It's like the 80th one, but I still enjoyed it. There were enough components done well. I think I liked the basic writing style, and I like the unconventionality. I haven't read anything quite like it before. Really weird. And the structure of the story was not your typical, try-fail thing. It was just kind of like... Overall, that one was quite a success, and I've already read another short story in the world, and I plan to continue that one. That one is also a physical read. 2 more to go. Next one, Pure by Juliana Baggett. I had read this one before, but I picked it up again with the intention of continuing on in the series. Ask me if I've done that yet. No. If you like teen dystopian stories like Divergent, Hunger Games, or whatever, this is a more adult version of that. You still have some of the tropes, but for some reason they didn't bother me. This is one of the most gritty stories that I've read in a while, and I wouldn't call it grimdark, but the same kind of gut punch you get with certain things happen in here. It is also wildly bizarre, and the bizarre things don't usually work for me, but the whole concept is like a nuclear fallout. And there are some that have been preserved in this dome, but everybody else who was exposed to it got fused to whatever or whoever they were next to when the bomb went off. And so you have all these people walking around with shit stuck to them. It's very weird, but also really cool atmosphere, very unconventional. Basically, if you've graduated from young adult dystopian, this would be a good one to pick up. I am looking forward to continuing this series sometime next year. The only thing I really had against it is there were a couple of things that felt a little too convenient. Like, oh, okay, that's how we're moving the plot forward. All right. And finally, my favorite of the bunch, coming in at a 4 out of 5 stars, Blood of an Exile by Brian Naslund. I was not sure about this book at first, especially given the cover, but someone recommended it to me because of how much I loved Anthony Ryan's Draconius Memoria series. Top 2 favorite series, like just one step down from Robin Hobb, I swear. I love it so much. It's my favorite series to recommend. So when someone says, hey, you might like this one also, I'm like, I'm listening. I wasn't sure at first. I really liked a couple of the POVs that we met initially, but I was braced. I was like, where are we going with this? The dragon magic was pretty cool. I thought I was getting this like dragon hunting extravaganza where it's all about hunting down these dragons and like harvesting magical properties from them or whatever. But no, that's not the case at all. That's kind of the periphery. The dragons are integral to the plot, but not really a part of the action. And it's more of like a political rescue revenge story. What it had going for it was creativity and really good momentum. So the story built incredibly well. And by about the midpoint of the book, I realized, I'm wildly engaged with this one right now. The author is especially good at writing dramatic action scenes and making you feel really invested in the outcomes. The only thing missing in here was some really good politicking. Like, he touched on it. There was a minute there where it started to get really good, but he dropped that thread before it got going. That is what I was hoping to get out of the second book, and that one kind of jumped the shark a little bit for me, so I'm still not sure how I feel about the series overall. I plan to pick up the third one, actually, after I finish my current read, and yeah, see if it sticks to landing. But as of right now, 4 out of 5 stars. It's weird enough, and like there are enough things about it that are kind of odd that I can see why not a lot of people talk about this one, but it's still a solid read and really entertaining. Side note, and I almost didn't mention this, but it bears mentioning, this author has a unhealthy fixation on people defecating. Like every chapter, there's some highlighted moment where he like takes the time to explain what's happening in that regard, and I thought, that might unnecessary. And there you have it. It's a bummer that I haven't come across a solid 5-star read out of this exploration yet, but that is the goal. That is what is driving me at this point. I know I have some hidden gems in this collection somewhere, and it's just a matter of finding them, and I can't wait. I'm hoping 2023 will be the year where I find the one that I can endorse wholeheartedly. Let's move on to part 2, where I talk about all of the books that I'm burning. This entire bin is what I have managed to collect throughout the year. There are a lot of books in here, so we're going to go through and see if I just have to have any of them. Otherwise, I think I'm ready to let them go. I always do my unhauls sitting on the floor. I'm not quite sure why, but my back does not thank me for it. Okay, so we have the ones we've already talked about. I have book 3 of this somewhere in this collection as well that we're going to get rid of, but yes, these are definitely going. And then letting go a paperback version of a Terry Brooks book, part of the Landover series, but I already have a hardcover for it, so I don't need the paperback. Okay, a lot of these books in here are strip copies. When you work as a bookseller, you get this perk. It costs the publisher more money to ship books back and forth than it does to just take a loss on them sometimes. So what they'll have us do is rip off the cover, send the cover back as proof that we are not hanging on to a completed copy of the book and selling it, and then recycle the rest of the books. And as booksellers, we get to take some home. And I worked as a bookseller for 12 years, and as you can imagine, I have brought home my fair share of strip copies. And having these on my shelves was awesome because that was back before ebooks existed. That was back before audiobooks existed. So the only way to read a book was to have a physical copy of it. Nowadays, everything is digital, so hanging on to the physical copies is not serving me as well as it used to. So I've found during this project that I am more willing to let things go. Some of them I keep as placeholders because it is nice to see them on the shelf, and you can't tell from the spine that it's a strip copy, but whatever. Anyway, that's why a lot of them don't have covers, and these will be being recycled. First thing in here is the Jane True trilogy. It's an urban fantasy. It's by Nicole Peeler, and it's about a Selkie, essentially. It got kudos for being about a Selkie because that's an unconventional urban fantasy magic creature, but I just didn't think I would get to these within the next 10 years, and I decided even if I do want to get to it, I probably wouldn't read them physically, so I didn't need to hang on to the copies. I'm not going to go through everything in here in this great of detail, just kind of flash a few of them across the screen. The Empyrean Odyssey by Thomas Reed. It's a Forgotten Realm series about a winged creature, and again, let these go because of the strip status, and if I did pick them up, it probably wouldn't be physical copies anyway. Same thing with these. Books 2 and 3 of Castaway of the Flying Dutchman series by Brian Jacks. Decided I was not interested in reading them enough to hang on to strip copies of this. If I like the series, what I'll more than likely do is go out and buy completed nice editions. Actually, I think I'm going to go through all of the paperbacks first, and then I'll go through and do all the nice hardcovers and trades and whatnot. Found the other Sharakai book, letting that one go. Okay, strip copies of a lot of the Crystal Longknife series. Now the rainbow, beautiful spines on these I really liked having on my shelves, but I guess the one benefit of recognizing that the writing style was just not for me and I didn't like the character was that I freed up this much space all in 1 month on that shelf. None of these have covers. I painstakingly collected them over the years, and yeah, I think I'm okay letting them go finally. The only thing that makes me want to give the series another try is because the spines are pretty. Do you ever find yourself doing that? Letting go a couple of Dennis McKiernan. 2 of these actually have covers. I went through and researched, I had like 10 of these books. I went through and researched them, figured out what order they came in, figured out what some of them were about. Like the Iron Tower is evidently his version of Lord of the Rings. It's like a direct knockoff. I found myself not really interested in reading that. There were a few others in his collection that I think I'd like to read more, so I hung on to those and decided to let these ones go. The author's writing style is great. I've read Once Upon a Winter's Night by him, that quartet, and he's got a very flowing fairy tale quality to his writing, which I appreciated. But do I have this much patience for more of his books, considering that I already have like 5 that I'm keeping? No. David Weber's The Oath series. These don't have covers. I have the first book as both an ebook and an audiobook, and I just, every time I look at it, I'm like, I really don't want to read that. It looks, I might be mistaken on this, but it looks very sexist and dated, especially when I read the back of the book. I thought, this does not sound like something that I would really be interested in right now. And do I really need to hang on to books like whatever these are, 2 or 3, when I'm not even sure I'm going to read the first one? Probably not. So that was an easy burn. Lady Penitent by Lisa Smeedman. It's a set of 3 Forgotten Realms random trilogy. I decided that of all the Forgotten Realms things that I'd like to dig into, I'm not even done with Drizzt yet. I need to catch up with Drizzt. And then beyond that, War of the Spider Queen is the one I'm really interested in. And so would I ever take the time to get to these within 10 years? Probably not. And what's more, these are available in audiobooks, so if I ever did decide to dive into them for whatever reason, then I can do that and I don't need the physical copies taking up space. Death's Daughter by Amber Benson. It's an urban fantasy series. This is an actress from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, tried her hand at writing. The reviews across the board say, you know, glad she had fun writing with it. It was awful. Even fans are like, oh, you know, it wasn't the best, but I enjoyed reading it because I loved her character or whatever. Not that she's writing about her character, it's totally different. Obnoxious, immature main character. I think that's what ultimately made me not want to pick this up. And the fact that the writer doesn't have any credibility, so I don't trust that she has the ability to take me on a good journey. I'm not even certain she reads books like this. You know, some authors try their hand and they have never read anything in the genre before. It's a red flag for me. So definitely okay letting those go. The Dragon Nimbus by Irene Radford. I've got these 2 omnibuses here, and these are actually really cool little books. But upon doing research, these are more fantasy romances. And I don't mind me some romance in books, but if I want a romance, I'm going to pick up like a new adult novel where romance writing is all that author does, and so they do it really well. If I want a fantasy, I'm going to pick up a fantasy book. The hodgepodge, usually what ends up happening is the fantasy element is really weak and the romance is stupid. It's like they're trying to do too many things at once, and so I find these types of books very unsatisfying in that regard. And I flipped through like the first 50 pages of the first book and just wasn't sold. Wasn't sold enough to keep it. So, but they are pretty editions, so that's the only reason why it's kind of hard to let those ones go. But will I read them? No! Oh, another Oath book. Another urban fantasy that I don't think I'll get to. It's a werewolf one. The reviews were mediocre at best. What's more, this one doesn't have an audio component, so I'd have to physically read them. And if I'm going to use my precious reading time, physical reading time on something, it's not going to be for a mediocre werewolf urban fantasy. Winds from a Foreign Sky by Katia Raymond. This is a classic fantasy I picked up on someone's recommendation, and just reading the back of the book while doing my evaluation process, I realized I don't want to read this one at all. There's nothing about this book that's appealing to me. And even seeing, I don't even like the cover, so even seeing it on the shelf makes me cringe. There's a weird reason to let something go, but yeah, don't think I'm going to read that. And then another customer, A Shadow on the Glass by Ian Irving, a View from the Mirror series. It's a quartet. Customer raved about this when I very first started book selling, so I picked it up, and I have just had no desire to pick it up. I like the cover, but I read the back of the book and did a lot of research on it, and it just doesn't seem like my type of story. It doesn't feel like it's aged very well. And what's more, they have these gorgeous hardcovers, so if I ever do get a whim and decide to read it, I will want to own those and not this one. I mean, I like the blue, but it's got a hole right through the front of the... So I'm okay letting that one go. The Geist series by Philippa Valentine. I did something really weird with this one. So I read the first half of the first book ages ago and DNF'd it for whatever reason. But there's something that has just been compelling me back to it. So I did something really weird and picked up a omnibus hardcover edition from Amazon for like 12 bucks. And am letting go these mass market paperbacks. The point of this project was to not buy more stuff, but I did. So hopefully I'll actually read it eventually. An Urban Fantasy by Jerry Reddy Smith. I have a trade paper of the first book in here somewhere, but I decided to let this one go because the subject matter didn't interest me. It's an urban fantasy. It's kind of got like a rock and roll angle to it. And just reading the first like couple of pages, the tone of the character, just not my type of character. An Unexpected Apprentice by Jody Lynn Nye. This is a Hobbit retelling if Frodo were a girl. I'm not much for retellings in the first place because once I know where a story is going, I'm less interested in it anyway. But a lot of the reviews on this one were just kind of mediocre. And I picked it up because of the apprentice word on the cover. I didn't actually read what it was about when I bought it because I love apprentice stuff. But yeah, there's no actual apprenticing in here, according to the reviewers. So I'm okay letting that one go also. Summer at Castle Auburn by Sharon Shin. I feel like this is one of those books that I should want to read and should like, but just had no interest. Hero and the Crown by Robin McKinley. This is an author I think a lot of people are going to be screaming at me to try and keep. They already have. But I don't really need to keep this weird physical strip coverless copy. I'm going to explore those through my library, I think. I don't need to take up physical space. The Iron Hunt by Marjorie Liu. Also a random strip that I didn't need to keep. And finally, A Taste of Magic by Andre Norton and Jane Rabb. Did a lot of research on this series, and evidently this was written partially near the end of Andre Norton's life, who, by the way, is an author that historically has not worked very well for me. I find her very dry writing. And even longtime fans of the series say they're glad that Jane Rabb took up the torch after Norton passed away and finished this book, but it wasn't anything that great. So that's all the paperbacks. Next we have my hardcovers in trade. So Wicked Game, that Jerry Reddy Smith one that I mentioned, not being interested in reading. I have a handful of Terry Brooks books here that I'm letting go. I went through and curated my collection not too long ago, and I've got this cool classic hardcover that I already had a different edition of that I didn't need. And then I've got 2 signed Brooks books here, mid-books in a series. Like this is book 4 of The Heritage. Book like what 2 of The Voyage, and it's cool having signed copies, but I deemed that I'm not interested enough in the author to warrant hanging on to these random ones. I'm not even sure I'm going to continue on in the Shannara series, even though I have some gorgeous editions. So I made the hard call to let those go, and then I have another Voyage Gerald book that's very pretty that, yeah, didn't need. That was a weird one. Oh, one more. Fate of the Fallen by Kel Cade. Just decided that I wasn't interested in picking it up. The Blinding Knife by Brent Weeks, book 2 in the Lightbringer series. I might actually read this at some point, but this is a science fiction book club edition, and if I really like it, I'm going to go out and find the actual standard size. The Dragon Throne series by Allison Baird. I feel kind of guilty letting these go based on how long I collected them, but I am zero interest in reading these whatsoever. I did a thing where I picked up the first chapter of the book and read through it and didn't care for it. I think I've graduated from this type of story now. I think I really would have liked that back in like grade school or high school, but yeah, a couple more books to offload. Quag's Keep by Andre Norton. This is a really cool bind-up, and the only reason I regret letting it go is because it's really pretty. But Andre Norton's writing does not work for me. And even though this is like a D&D where they get transported to this world and become the characters they created, a lot of the reviews said it was really dry and the writing unnecessarily clunky and convoluted, and that's exactly how I felt about her other series that I read. So even though I think the cover, this edition is really cool, I don't think I will ever read it. Southern Fire, I mentioned that I replaced this copy with the nicer, newer covers, and I like those a lot better. But this was a pretty cool book. Glad to have finally explored that one. Bones of the Dragon, first book in a series by Margaret Wise and Tracy Hickman. And I really like it when these authors get together. I have read 4 of their 5 other series that they have. So much stuff that I've consumed from these writers. I was led to believe with all the research that I did that this story would not be something I would enjoy. One of their weaker ones that they've done. And I kind of took that at face value. Some of these I'm letting go because of personally, like I just decided I don't want to read them, and whatever whim I was following at the time, I'm kind of going with. But this is one of the cases where I let the reviews on Goodreads influence my decision, and I feel comfortable letting that one go. Riddle of Stars by Patricia McKillop. I feel guilty letting this one go because it was my mom's, but I have so many other books from her that I actually cherish, and the awful experience I had with Signet makes me think that, yeah, I'm not going to enjoy this author at all. We are not going to get along. Reading and not liking Signet means I can get rid of more books off my shelf that I know I'm never going to get to. And last but not least, Lords of Deuce. This is a set of 4 books, self-published at the time, from a writer whom I actually really love. His Obsidian Dragon trilogy is one of my all-time favorites, and I also have tried other writings from him and really like them. That being said, I love all of the other stuff that I know about this author, but nothing about this series sounds interesting to me at all. And this is the only one in this entire box that I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready to let that go or not. But honestly, it's available as an ebook. I don't need to hang on to these absolutely hideous covers for my shelves. That one's kind of cool. I spent the entire month agonizing over this, and I think I am finally at peace with just letting these go and keeping the books from this author that I'm really interested in reading. That's all! These are all the strip copies that are going to get recycled. You can see I've freed up so much space in my collection this year. And then these are all the rest of them. I am experimenting with a Pango account. I just learned about it about a month ago. I guess that's an app where you can buy and sell books. So I'm going to try to upload these and see if I can recoup some of my lost investment on them. But if that doesn't pan out and it's a huge pain in the butt, I'm just going to end up donating them. We'll see how it goes. But if you're interested in supporting the channel by buying a book from me, I'll link in the description. It would definitely make me feel a little better to see these go to a good home, as opposed to just sending them off into a void. Do you ever donate books to like a local charity shop and then think, you know, these people are just going to throw these in the garbage? We have a very religious one where I live, and I know for sure that they just throw away half the books I send there, so I don't send them books anymore. Screw that. Anyway, moving on. Now I'd like to take you through and show you how the section looks now as opposed to what it looked like before, kind of give you an indication of what progress I've made over the last 9 months. This is what the section now looks like. There aren't any more books for this project in this top area over here. Everything has been consolidated to this one wall. And you'll see a few gaps in places, but for the most part, this is filled in. That's because I squished everything over, and I also acquired a bunch of new books. 9 months worth of work, you really can't tell too much, but I mean, evidence on the floor of all the books I'm getting rid of. Things are happening in here. So I have done 9 sections so far. That one down there, that one, that one. That one up here that's hidden, there's a gap behind the bear. Done one right there, one up there, oh. One up there, one right there, kept most of that shelf, and then one up here. Oh, and Terry Brooks. There are 34 sections. We have done 9 so far, so we have a long ways to go. But I thought I'd let you know my eventual goal. So I want to put all of my mystery books on those top 2 shelves. Let me swing over here. Everything is right here on this side bookcase. And I like them here, but I think I would like them better over in this area. So at the very least, by the end of the year, I would really love to have read through this section enough to free up those top 2 shelves. And the eventual goal is to have all of my unread books down to just these 4 bookcases. And then from there, I'll set a new goal. But yeah, that's where I'm aiming for. And I think it's doable. Alongside Read, Burn, Hoard, I also have a goal to read more physically owned books anyway. So I'm hoping a lot of these will get read in 2023. I'm shooting for at least 50 of them. But if you compound that with as many that I'm going to be unhauling, I think it's going to be really cool to see where I am in a year. In fact, I might save this clip and input it into next year's wrap-up and give you kind of a contrast of where we are as opposed to where we started. And last but not least, the whole point of doing this entire project was to fit a comfy chair in here, and one thing led to another, and I figured out a way to fit one in here even without having completed the project, and drumroll, oh, there's shit on it, hang on. Ta-da! I have a comfy chair in my library. I'm so excited. This thing is rad. It's massive. I have so much room. Basically, it was like, how can I get the biggest chair possible without it technically being considered a sofa? And this is what we ended up with. But yes, love it so much. And that wraps it up. That was a lot. I'm really tickled at how many of you comment that you really love this series, and you make it a lot of fun for me to keep going with it. It's really fun to find people who are as interested in these type of projects as I am. So thank you so much for watching these lengthy vlogs with me. Let me know how your reading year went. Did you do any of these types of projects, or do you have plans to do any of these in 2023? I'd love to hear about it. Thanks again, and I hope to catch you next time.